Federalism is a culture. Federalism is a political contrivance which balances power of the center with rights of the states. From one of the neighboring states, we always used to hear that the CM is the CEO of that state. The conflict between the elected and unelected, we hope that the elected will always prevail over unelected. I won't say hypocrisy, but sometimes some of the states may not be willing to empower the local self-government bodies. And today, I think Kerala legislature has created history by translating the first volume of Constituent Assembly debates. The president of this session, Professor K.C. Sunny, former Vice Chancellor, New Orleans, Honorable Justice G.B. Reddy, former Chief Justice, Patna High Court, Honorable Justice Sophie Thomas, former Judge, High Court of Kerala, Professor N.K. Jayakumar, Chairperson, Expert Committee, Constituent Assembly Debates Translation Project in absentia, and Dr. Krishna Kumar, Secretary, the Legislative Assembly of Kerala. At the outset, I thank the Legislative Department and the Assembly of the great state of Kerala for inviting me over here during my first 10 days of assuming office as the Vice Chancellor of New Orleans. Professor K.C. Sunny has already opened up the discussion by throwing light on some of the most important aspects of the federalism, which is a vibrant topic and which is assuming greater importance in modern times. And when we were students, we were taught about only quasi-federalism and maybe some kind of positive federalism, and not the cooperative federalism, uncooperative federalism, the collaborative federalism or competitive federalism. There are different models which are coming up now. And as pointed out by my previous speaker, different attributes of federalism need to be understood in order to understand the working of this constitution. And probably you will find that about 1/3 or in fact 1/4 of the nations throughout the world, they adopted federalism because of the size of the country, the population and other factors. And fortunately, India is one of them. And as everyone knows, there is always a need for a bottom-up approach rather than top-down approach, even in the matter of governance. That's where the decentralization assumes greater importance. I do not want to go into the historical aspects. When the first federal constitution came into existence sometime in 1789 in United States of America, there was an experiment made sometime in 1781. All those former British colonies came together, then they formed a confederation. Then it was realized that the confederation had neither the sword nor the purse. So ultimately, to form a more perfect union, they came out with the Constitution of United States of America. Then the saga began, and now there are about 46 or 47 countries in the world which follow this system. And one of the Western authors pointed out that The word federal comes from fidus, which means a covenant. And he went on to say that the federalism has biblical origins because you come across the word fidus or covenant number of times even in the Holy Bible. And today, when we are talking about federalism in India, we have to remember the endeavor made by Motilal Nehru Committee in 1928. The first recommendation was made by that committee in order to have the federal principle in the governance of India, then British India, of course, then followed by the Government of India Act 1935. And in fact, most of the federal provisions present in the Constitution of 1950, they have been borrowed very liberally from the Government of India Act 1935. Well, if we look into the intention of the framers of the Constitution, I don't understand Malayalam, but I could barely decipher what the Honorable Chief Minister was trying to say in the morning about the intention of framers of the Constitution, and he was referring to some of the eminent members of Constituent Assembly. Initially, the idea was to have a very strong central government consisting of autonomous states for effective governance. And the eminent persons like Pandit Nehru, initially he wanted even residuary powers to be allotted to the states. But post-independence, the residuary powers came to be vested in the center under Article 248. And the federal principle has been maintained not in the strict sense because of the exigencies of the time. And there is a criticism also leveled as far as misuse of Article 356 is concerned, but not much during the Nehruvian rule, 1964 till 1964. Then comes the vision of Mahatma Gandhi, who dreamt of the village Swaraj, village independence and village republics. And today I think we have realized the dream of Mahatma Gandhi, at least on the paper and to some practical extent, after 73rd and 74th amendments. But it is yet to become really effective and efficient. Dr. Rajendra Prasad was not really concerned about the labeling of the Indian Constitution, whether federal or unitary, but he made one wonderful statement in his speech on 26th November 1949. It's there on the screen for you, and he says he had two regrets. One is that the Constituent Assembly couldn't prescribe educational qualifications for the legislators, members of the legislatures. The second one is that they couldn't provide the Constitution in a regional language. I think today, thanks to the efforts made by the successive governments and thanks to the assistance given by artificial intelligence, the translation has become quite easy, subject to human monitoring and supervision. And today, I think Kerala legislature has created history by translating the first volume of Constituent Assembly debates into a regional language, that is Malayalam. I am very sure that other states will be following suit. And Dr. Ambedkar addressed two important aspects. One is about the charge that there has been over-centralization, and he says that there is no over-centralization under the Indian Constitution, that the states are really autonomous. And he also says that any centralizing tendency should be confined only to emergency situations. And he went on to say that the very fact that we are using the expression Union of States under Article 1 denotes that India is a federal state. As I mentioned in the beginning of this small presentation, in the good old days we used to talk about only Unitarianism and federalism. The moment we spoke about Unitarianism, we used to, in fact, quote A.V. Dicey. Then Federalism, the Casey Ware. But today, there are different kinds of federalism, and we are talking more about asymmetric federalism. The federalism which is not similar and which is not permanent. The nature of federalism changes depending on the facts and circumstances of each case. For example, in the good old days, we used to talk only about dual federalism, having different layers. So, the top layer belongs to the center, the bottom layer belongs to the states. Probably it is a myth today. This kind of federalism was also called layer cake federalism. Then comes the cooperative federalism. Everyone is talking about, sometimes we come across full page advertisements, about GST and all, saying that cooperative federalism in practice, marble cake federalism. Probably that is need of the hour. And fiscal federalism, I have 2 or 3 important cases to discuss. Very briefly, I will try to touch upon. Then we are talking about, because it is not only the power which has to be shared, but also the finances. Unless the states are provided enough resources to build themselves financially, I don't think the federalism will be a success. So, when we look at the financial relations between the center and states, we come across any number of provisions, including the latest GST. Then we are talking about competitive federalism. And from one of the neighboring states, we always used to hear that the CM is the CEO of that state. And he was always on some world tour or other in order to attract more investment into the state. So, the states are trying to compete with the center in terms of either attracting the investment or attracting the developmental projects, or in fact, sometimes even in social welfare measures. So, this is another important development. And recently, the Supreme Court spoke about uncooperative federalism in the context of GST, where the Supreme Court held that the recommendations of the GST Council are not binding on the states. They are purely recommendatory in nature. That Mohit Minerals judgment, and which upheld the taxation on certain freight charges by the Gujarat state legislature. Then we are talking about interactive federalism. So, this is also a recent one. In fact, these two are borrowed expressions. Uncooperative federalism, again, it can be traced to an article with the same name published in Yale Law Journal in 2009, authored by 2 persons, Jessica Bullman and Heather K. Jerkin. Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, he quoted it, in fact, elaborately in Mohit Minerals' judgment. Then we have interactive federalism, polyphonic federalism. Polyphonic means having different sounds at the same time. So, this is again traced to another article published somewhere in Emory University School of Law Public Review. This is only to say that the federalism is a dynamic concept. It doesn't remain static, and its nature also doesn't remain permanent. At the cost of repetition, I may say this. When we are talking about the federalism at work in India, I am not here to refresh your memory as to the constitutional provisions. So, we have articles 245 to 293 encompassing the legislative, administrative and financial relations. Then we have number of schedules, 5th and 6th, Professor Sunny has already mentioned regarding the scheduled areas in general and also in regard to the northeastern states. Then we have the 11th and 12th schedules also, which remain mostly on the paper. I think there is some kind of, I won't say hypocrisy, but sometimes some of the states may not be willing to empower the local self-government bodies sufficiently. The same thing has been pointed out by the National Commission to Review Working of the Constitution, which was headed by Justice M. N. Venkatachalaya. So, few case studies. The first one about the nature of GST Council resolutions. And we have this judgment of 2022, the Supreme Court judgment. And ultimately, the Supreme Court went on to say that the states are also competent to levy certain taxes on the freight charges under the GST Act, and cooperative federalism includes uncooperative federalism. So that's where Justice D.Y. Chandrachud elaborated. Another important area, recent one, last year, 2024, is about Mineral Area Development Authority versus Steel Authority of India Limited. And in fact, this is one judgment which came to the rescue of many of the state governments having mining resources. And you will find that a 9 judges bench of the Supreme Court, by a majority of 8-1, directed that states may levy or renew demands of tax pertaining to certain entries in list 2, that is state list for entries 49 and 50 of the 7th schedule. Then in fact, till that time it was the center which was collecting taxes and not allowing the states to in fact improve its income as far as the mining resources are concerned. And the Supreme Court acknowledged that the resource curse suffered by states like Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand and Orissa, which have abundant mineral resources but still have low per capita income. So it was really a savior as far as the states' financial resources are concerned. It's a good development in the interest of the states. Then of course we have the social engineering concept. So now in fact the states are also empowered to in fact identify or to go for micro classification among the backward classes or the oppressed classes. I think recently with regard to Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, then in a judgment held by in fact which can be traced to Punjab also, this Davinder Singh judgment, another important judgment was given by the Supreme Court which recognizes the federalism even while recognizing the rights of the states. Then we have S.R. Bommai, I don't want to explain, but I would always say that speed breakers have been applied on the misuse of Article 356. In S.R. Bommai judgment, in the morning, Honorable CM was also mentioning about the federalism and secularism being recognized as the basic features of the Constitution, reiterated in this state also. And here I would like to draw your attention to another judgment where we talk about sometimes even constitutional fraud. Nabam Rebiya's case, 2018, the Arunachal Pradesh governor preponed the date of assembly session, thereby leading to fall of the elected government. And thereafter, the matter went up to Supreme Court. Supreme Court reversed, in fact, reinstated the state government, which eventually fell because of lack of majority. And there, the Supreme Court reiterated the principle that short of a constitutional crisis, the governor has no role to play. So this is a caveat as far as the role of governors is concerned. The National Capital Territory of Delhi also offers certain solutions to the present status of federalism in India. And for the first time in 2023, the Supreme Court held that the Lieutenant Governor stands in the same position as the governor of a state. And as far as the civil services are concerned, it is the elected government which would have control over the civil servants who are allocated to the National Capital Territory of Delhi, and it's not the Lieutenant Governor. And governors versus governments, I'm not here to make any controversial statement. The matter is pending before the Supreme Court on a presidential reference. We are talking about state of Tamil Nadu versus governor of Tamil Nadu. And on a second thought, probably an ordinary person can always feel that the mandate of the people cannot be undermined when the governors sit on the bills which are submitted for his assent under Article 200. And the real controversy now is not only about the governor, but also the president, who are given a timeline of 3 months. And, but again, the question is the conflict between the elected and unelected. We hope that the elected will always prevail over unelected in the constitutional scheme, because we the people are sovereign. And another aspect is about Article 370. Of course, it has a historical legacy, but its abolition has been upheld. That is maybe, the counter to the federal concept, but at the same time, in the words of Dr. Ambedkar, probably, when an emergency-like situation arises, the union's power gets, in fact, enlarged. And in October 2024, a few months back, another important judgment has been given in the direction of protecting fiscal federalism, that is Uttar Pradesh versus Lalita Prasad Vaishtat. So, where the Supreme Court says that the state government has the power to regulate industrial alcohol. Previously, this was not the case. Again, probably this would be providing new avenues as far as the revenue enhancement is concerned. These are the questions which matter today in the light of the experiences we have had. The question is, when should the states cooperate with the federal mandates? We have seen some of the states passing resolutions against some of the initiatives of the central government, and it may be an instance of uncooperative federalism and a healthy sign of the, in fact, democracy. Because just because a resolution is passed, that may not have real effect in many cases, but this is one important issue. The second one is, I think the solutions lie in number of sources, like Sarkaria Commission report, which offers number of solutions, then the recommendations of the National Commission to review working of the Constitution. Professor Sunny mentioned about underutilization of interstate council. I think most of the times interstate council is maybe convened only to deal with the extremist activities and all, or some wing left, right, or whatever it is. But I think there are better and more areas which, need focus in order to reduce the friction between the states and the union. I think along with the Finance Commission, or maybe Niti Aayog, which is not a statutory body, the interstate council also needs to be looked at. Then coming to the conclusion, federalism is a culture. Like, we are talking about cultural federalism, but I would go to the extent of saying that federalism itself is a culture. And that culture is imbibed within the Constitution. So you can call it constitutional federalism, which is part of constitutional values as well as culture. And it is a dire necessity as far as India is concerned, the great nation with, an indestructible union with destructible states. But when the greatness has to be sustained, federalism has to be sustained. And we have seen that in the good old days, we used to draw a Venn diagram as far as legislative relations are concerned. So one circle representing the center, other circle representing the states. With regard to the, 7th schedule, list 1, list 2, list 3, it was very easy to say 97 subjects to the union, 66 to the states, 47 to both in the concurrent list. Today we can't say that. We have to add something very cautiously. Originally 97, 66, 47. Now 97 is more than 100 as far as central list is concerned. 66 is less than 66, now 61 or so, or maybe even little less than that. Concurrent list, now it is no more 47, it's 50 plus. So there is a shift towards centralization. I think this has to be taken with a pinch of salt. So a balance has to be maintained between the rights of the states with the power of the union. That's what, in fact, A.B. Dicey said. Federalism is a political contrivance which balances power of the center with rights of the states. I think in order to do that, there must be an equilibrium which needs to be maintained. And it is asymmetric federalism. So as I said, depending on, for example, during COVID, nobody took, the center as something faulty, or it stands as faulty when they said we will not release the GST share due to the states during the COVID, because which was a pandemic, and you please raise your resources from other sources. Maybe we have to rise to the occasion in such cases, but not during the normal times. So judiciary has been playing a proactive role, commendable role, as far as protecting the federal fabric of the Indian Constitution is concerned. So if our unity, integrity and sovereignty are to be sustained and retained, federalism is the only savior. Not by snatching away any power from the states that the center can, in fact, dictate. We have to work together, and ultimately the Gandhian dream of village Swaraj and village republic also must be realized. That's what the National Commission to Review the Working of the Constitution said. So states also are supposed to, in fact, focus on the 11th and 12th schedules with the active collaboration of the center. So these are some of the experiences and challenges. I hope that I have not deviated from my timing as well as the topic. I thank all of you for a patient hearing. Thank you so much.